Hi, I'm Peggy Farren, and you're watching the Understand Photography Show, where we talk about travel, nature, and fine art photography. Welcome to episode 134. We're going to be talking with nature and wildlife photographer Judy Malloch, who has been on the show before. We invited her back because she was that good. So we're going to talk about bird photography today. But first, I just want to remind you that we are a podcast first. So if you're watching us on YouTube or Facebook, thank you for watching. But that is the reason that we don't have any visuals, because most of our audience is podcast oriented, so they're listening to us in the car. We are going to put some of Judy's beautiful photographs in the show notes. So go to understandphotography.com after the show. Listen to the show first. And check out some of Judy's work. And then Heather does a great job of taking notes, so she summarizes the show as well. We still have openings for our Tuscany Ladies Only tour. That is in September. It's at the very end of September into early October of 2019 this year. Limited to just 7 ladies, a very small group. We have our own private guide who lives in Tuscany. He was my guide when I went to Tuscany, and I was so impressed with this guy, so he is going to be our guide in Tuscany. So that is really fun. We're staying in an old farmhouse. It's a very, very over-the-top trip, so come on with us. And we're also going to be having a live webinar about our upcoming South Africa tour, which is September 2020. So make sure you're on our mailing list so you don't miss any of this stuff, okay? Understandphotography.com. As soon as you get on there, you'll see click here for freebies. Anytime you sign up for any of our freebies, you'll be put onto the mailing list. So we'll see you there. Okay, so today we've got Judy Malloch. She was on episode number 73, so if you want to go back and watch that, remember all the show notes, all the old shows, everything. You can look through YouTube, but you can also go on to understandphotography.com, and you'll see it says the Understand Photography Show, and you can go back and watch any of the old shows. Judy's an award-winning nature and wildlife photography. She's a photo tour leader with Nature's Tapestry and out of Chicago. So welcome, Judy.
Thank you,
Welcome
Peggy.
back, I should say.
It's great to be back. Thank you.
Different set.
Pardon?
Different set, same Judy.
Hope
Same
so.
Peggy.
Same Peggy, yeah.
So let's talk about bird photography today. You ready?
I'm ready.
Because we're going to we're going to teach by me asking you questions. You do the teaching. How's that sound?
I'll try.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Because you're really good at bird photography.
Thank you.
You've got amazing, amazing images.
Thank you.
So let's start off with just composition. Are there rules in bird photography about composition that we should be following or not following, or are there rules to break in? What kind of composition?
There are always rules to break, but there are rules to follow, and I think if you're photographing a bird, you always want to make room for the bird to be able to leave the image. So if your bird is facing to the right, then you want to have most of your canvas to the right. And in general, you don't want to clip anything from the bird. You don't want to clip the wings. You don't want to,
Clip
cut
off his
anything
little
unless
talons.
yeah, the talons, exactly, or the tail. The tail's sometimes can be a real tricky thing. But there are occasions where the cropping will take you right in if you want to show the face rather than something else, whatever it is that you're really interested in. But in general, you want to make sure that you get everything in and nothing clipped, and also that it's in focus. So in doing that, you have to have the proper depth of field so that you make sure you get the tail in and that it isn't out of focus, unless you want it to be.
Right.
I mean, it's all in how you choose to take the picture, but you want to have some kind of a plan in mind when you set up your settings.
So let's say that I'm taking a picture of a bird that's perched in a tree kind of far away. So I'm using a long lens, so I'm going to have a shallow depth of field no matter what, aren't I?
Mm-hmm.
So how am I going to keep the bird as focused as if I want the whole bird, if he's really far away, but I got a big old lens, like a 600 millimeter lens.
Yeah,
Can I keep the bird all the way? I mean,
well, with the bird being that far away, you're probably not going to have the problem with the tail. But what you may have a problem is with the angle, because if he's high up in a tree and you're shooting up, then your angle's going to be quite steep. But as you move back, as you take your tripod, if you're shooting with a tripod and your long lens back further and further, you decrease that angle.
Okay.
So, and when we had that happen a couple of weeks ago, we were doing the barred owls, and there were some people with us, some friends, and he was shooting, and I said, if you move back, you're going to get that, you're going to lower that, because you don't, it isn't ideal to be shooting up.
shooting up. I always wonder, how do they shoot the eagles?
Well, if it...
Do they go, is that what they do? They just
do.
back up and use a
put
huge
on,
lens? And
put on teleconverters, whatever you can to get the most, you know, the most length possible. And because the ideal situation is to be at eye level. You know, you want to be able to get as close to the eye level as possible.
And that's not very possible a lot of the time, right?
No, no.
So,
unless, of course, it's bird flight.
So, and for that sharp image, am I using what kind of aperture?
Well, usually I shoot, in general, it's usually like an f8.
Okay.
But that depends on what the background's like. If the background is not very attractive, then you might want a lesser depth of field. So you might take it down to an f4 or whatever.
Okay.
But also, again, that depends on light. There's so many
I know.
things that depend.
You need more light, and
you have to think of so many different things.
Now, when you're, let's go back to composition, since I got off the first question that I was in the middle of. I got distracted. How much of the frame should the subject occupy? Now that I know is a loaded question, but do you have any? Obviously, the room in front. I think that's like one of my picky things. I'm so glad you brought that up first.
Yeah.
But I mean, so if it's like a close-up of the head, I guess you don't need any room around the head, right?
Well, you know, a lot of that's personal preference too. I like to have a little space around my subject. I don't like them too tight in the frame, and usually it's 1/3 to 2/3. But depends again on what your background is. If you have a beautiful background and it enhances your picture and your subject, then you're going to take in more of that background. But if it's really the subject that you're interested in and the background is not bad, but nothing that's going to add a lot to the picture, then it's going to take up more.
Okay, that's good advice. I like that. That's good. I was thinking that wasn't the greatest question, but now you gave a great answer.
Thanks, Peggy.
All right, so we just talked about angles. So the best angle is to shoot at the same level.
If
you're 5 feet tall, all birds should be at 5 feet, right?
Yeah.
So if there are shorebirds on the ground, you're going to be laying on your belly.
Exactly. Yep.
But if they're up in the tree, you're going to back up as far as you can and zoom in.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Do you have any advice for getting down on your belly to take pictures?
Well, be nice if it's a comfortable place, like lots of sand.
Do you bring a mat or anything?
No, I don't. I usually just, because you never know where it's going to be, and you can't carry all these things around all the time. No, I just go for it. I just
lay down on whatever's there. Do you ever lay down on anything really yucky?
I think when you get into it, you're just so excited to get that picture that you forget that you might be lying on a rock. No.
A rock would be uncomfortable.
Yeah, no.
I just think about fire ants or something. Have you ever done that?
I've not gone
God,
into
that would
that.
be horrible.
No. Because the shorebirds on the beach, you're usually in a fairly comfortable area to.
Although right now, did you know it's snake breeding season right now? We've got snakes on the beach.
What kind?
Black, little black. I mean, they're not dangerous,
not bad.
but they're still snakes on the beach.
Yeah, I don't think I'd like to curl up with one.
You just don't usually think about snakes on the beach, you know, and then there they are. All right, so tell us about equipment. All right, let's start with the tripod, because that's a big subject. Actually, Joe and I did a whole show on tripods.
Did you?
Yeah. And then I think we've got one of our short, because we put out a short video every Tuesday. So I think we did one on gimbal heads. Yeah. Because there are all kinds of different gimbal heads too.
Yeah, there's gimbal heads and Wimberley heads, and then the Gitsu tripods, and then there's other tripods right now, and I'm really not up on all the different makes, but they're getting lighter. I think what people are looking for today is light, equipment.
They're getting lighter and more expensive.
Yes, they kind of go together.
I know.
Yeah, they do. But really, the airlines are getting tougher on your heavy equipment, and it's just been wonderful what's happening in the camera world, in the lens world today.
So you don't have a favorite tripod?
Well, I've used the Gitsu tripod, since I've started photography in a Wimberley head. But once I got the Nikon 300 2.8, I could hand hold that, and I pretty much use that most of the time. I could hand hold it for flight shots. It's fast, it's sharp.
Nikon what was it?
It's a Nikon 300 2.8.
Oh wow, that sounds heavy.
Well, it is fairly heavy. But there's so many new things coming out now, too. I've just got on order right now from Hunt's the 500, the new 500, which weighs approximately 3 pounds. And I'm excited. I just got word today that it should be here this week.
So it's just straight up 500 millimeter from Nikon.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yep. It's their new lens out. It's been so popular that I think it's been on back order for them for quite a while now.
Wow. How much did it cost?
I'm trying to remember. I think it's about 3,600.
3,600.
It's around that area.
That doesn't sound as bad as I thought it would be.
No.
I thought you were going to say more expensive than that.
Yeah, the 500, the regular 500, Nikon 500 runs around 11,000.
Yeah. Ooh.
But this is getting extremely high ratings, so I'm hoping that it lives up to what I've heard, because it's good. We travel such long distances that it gets to be a concern, the weight. Yeah. So
I know, when I first started my business, I bought 2 lenses. I bought and I was a wedding photographer, so I bought the 24 to 70, I'm a Canon shooter, 24 to 70 f2.8,
that's a nice
which
lens.
Is still my primary lens. I've had that lens since 2001. And then the other one I had was the 70 to 200 f2.8.
That's a nice
And those
lens
were the
too.
2 lenses that I used for weddings, but then as I got older, that 70 to 200, I got rid of it. It just got too heavy for me. I mean, I can't carry that thing around for 10 hours,
I know. Well, it is heavy. You're right.
So,
but it was great because you could be a fair distance away from your subjects, and they wouldn't even know you're taking pictures.
Yeah.
I loved it for children.
I got instead I used the 70 to 300 f4, and it weighs less, and it's a nice lens. I've been very happy with that lens. But I don't shoot birds. So if somebody was on somewhat of a budget, but they really want to get into wildlife photography, what lens should they get? Do you have a recommendation?
Well, that's a good question, but again, it would depend on what it is they want to shoot.
What if it's birds?
I'm thinking of the size of birds. I mean, if you're shooting hummingbirds, you really need to have a fairly, good size lens, 500, 600, because they're so tiny.
Yeah.
And to be able to capture them really well. But if somebody's just starting, and if it was Canon, I think that 100 to 400 is the great lens for wildlife. For me, in Nikon, I like the 300 2.8, but that is a fairly costly lens. I think it runs around $6,500 now. Oof. When I got it, it was down around $4,000. It's gone up in price. But
what about the Sigma or the Tamron? They've got that 150 to 600. Do you know anything about those?
Don't know too much about the Tamron, but I do know about the Nikon 200 to 500, and that's a good lens, good telephoto lens. Because I've used the 500 a lot, it was difficult for me to move back from a 5.4 to a 5.6 because that allows you less lighting.
Yeah.
And I was so accustomed to the f4 and the amount of light you would get.
Well, it's easier to focus with a camera or a lens like that.
But it is a good lens, and the Sigma's good too. The Sigma 150 to 600. It's a good lens.
I have that lens, and I love it. And
Gary has that lens.
I got it from Hunt's. I impulse bought that.
Did you?
Yeah. I mean, I didn't even need a long lens. I had the Canon 100 to 400.
Yeah.
At the time, I still had that. I had the 70 to 200 still. I had a 100 to 400. I had the 70 to 300. And I needed a wide-angle lens, and so I bought another long lens. Why
not, right? But it is a good lens. You're right. It's excellent.
that Roman with Roman.
Roman with Roman. I know. That's the
wish
first
I
time
could do his
used it.
last name, but
Yeah, I can't
I
pronounce
still
it
have
either.
not had him on the show. I keep trying, but it's just hard to. He's on the go all the time, but he's the one. I was listening to one of his talks at a conference one time, and he was just talking about how good that lens was, and so.
Well, I met him at Wacko. He called me and he said, I'm coming over. And I knew he had the Sigma line, and he let me try it, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is amazing, because of course it's much lighter.
Yep.
You can hand hold it.
Yep.
Don't have to have a tripod.
Yep.
Because that makes a big difference too, when you don't have to walk with all of those
All that
things.
stuff. So, but as a birder, you really do need some kind of gimbal head, like a Wimberley or something that is going to move, right? And is there any key to using a gimbal?
Not really. It's very simple.
Is it?
Yeah, it really
I've
is.
never used one. I mean, I said Joe and I did a video on it, meaning Joe did a video with me standing there.
I think probably where one might run into some problems is birds in flight, you know, getting them into the lens. But as far as actually technically using it, you know, it's up and down and around and back and forth, and you can flip it around so it goes the other way. I mean, if something happens to happen behind you and you want to move quickly, you don't have to pick your tripod up and do it. You just flip the
see, I didn't even know.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Before I had one, I used to see people, and I suffered a little envy because I thought, oh man, that's great. It is good though.
That
Definitely
is cool.
worth it. Yeah.
And one last equipment question. What if somebody's really going to, they know it's all about wildlife, mostly birding, should they get a crop frame camera or should they get a full frame camera, or does it matter?
Well, that's, you know, I'm sure you'd get a lot of different answers to that. I would have a difficult time answering that. I use full frame. I'm happy with it. And, you know, I'm using the Nikon 850 right now, and it's a 45 megapixel. It's wonderful. It's you can come in, you know, you can take a picture that seems fairly small in the frame, and it would be for most cameras, but with, you know, that much
45 megapixels,
yeah,
baby.
you can crop and still get a reasonably
That's amazing.
good picture. And,
that's a camera that was back ordered like crazy. You couldn't
yeah.
get that for a long time. I don't know if they.
Well, you know, there's an interesting story for me on that. There was a fellow, John, that worked with Hunt's dear man. He passed away last week. That's why I'm thinking of him.
Aww.
I loved him. He was there for a number of years, and he called me. And he said, Judy, we've got the 850. And I said, oh, John, I think I'm going to wait on that. I had enough equipment. And I thought, I'll hang in there for a little bit. And he said, Judy, you need this camera. And I said, really, John? I said, give me an hour. So I waited an hour and I called him back. And I said, okay. So I think of him. Every time I pick it up, I think, thank you for pushing me.
Because you're really happy with it.
Yeah,
Okay, so that's
why.
why.
It's the best camera that I've ever had.
Oh, wow. That's a big thing to say.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Jeez. All right, so let's get back to shooting the birds. Shooting the birds. So I know you don't have a choice, but as far as faraway birds, but what about close-up birds? Is there a distance you should be? And it's like a two-part question. So is there a distance you should be photographically, and then is there a distance you should be ethically?
Well, first it would depend on what lens you had. If you had a prime lens that was, say, just a straight 500, then you've got to make sure that you've left enough room to be able to get the bird and some canvas besides. But as far as the well-being of the bird, I think if you're photographing anything that's nesting, that has babies, that it's like anything, you want to respect them and not get too close. You don't want anything that's going to cause stress to the animal or to the bird that you're shooting. I remember Gary and I being in the Pontanel, and we went down to film the baby skimmers. And we went to get out of the boat. It was just Gary and I and the fellow who was manning the boat. And the parents started dive bombing us. And I said to Gary, you know, it's not worth it. It's just not worth it. Let's go. Yeah. And so we knew we were too close. We'd overstepped the mark. If we could have photographed them back a bit, and the babies, but they're so tiny. I mean, you've got to be reasonably close because they're such a little fluff ball. You can hardly see them from any distance. So we didn't get them that day. So I in our shooting experience, we don't do anything that will cause any stress.
Is there any any guideline for distance, like 5 feet, 20 feet? Or does it depend on the bird?
Yeah, well, if there's no
and then
babies.
look at the alligator farm in St. Augustine. You're practically touching the nests.
I know.
I think they're just so accustomed to people.
That's right. And if they don't look stressed, I don't think there's any real. I mean, some people come up real close because they just want to get a portrait shot. So I don't think. I think you just have to watch the body language of the bird that you're shooting, and if he looks nervous, and of course, if you're going to take pictures of him, you want him to stay. So you don't want to go too close and have him fly away.
Good point.
So,
I have a mockingbird who makes a nest in my trellis by my front door every year, and I get dived bombed on a regular basis. But it's my house.
That's right, Peggy.
And I am going out that front door just because she makes that nest every year. She gets so mad, but it's my house.
They do get pretty feisty.
Yeah, mockingbirds they're
and the grackles do too. The grackles will dive bomb you. They get really.
I don't have a problem with them so far. My parents have them in a bird feeder, but they haven't bothered my bird feeder yet. Happily, you know. The mockingbirds are interesting though. One time because my bird feeders are right out my window, and where I work, so I sit there all day long. And one time I watched a mockingbird beat the crap out of a snake. It was fun to watch. I mean, she was picking that thing up. It was big and throwing it around. I thought, ooh. Next time I get dive bombed, I'm going to get a little nervous, you know?
Yeah. All right. Wear a helmet.
Yeah. Now, do you try to tell a story with your bird images?
I do.
Like, what kind of stories can you tell with birds? Or what kind of stories do birds tell us?
Well, birds tell us a lot, and that has always been probably the thing that was most important for me. When I do take a picture, I want it to tell a story. I don't want it to just be a documentary picture that just documents the species. There's so much to learn in wildlife. There's the love in wildlife is incredible. What you can see. You know, what I've learned in photography has taken me far beyond just taking the picture. It's the interaction. And I was out at Wakotahachie one time, and there were just, I don't know how many wood storks there were on the island there. And I thought, oh my gosh, how am I ever going to take any pictures here? It was just a mass. But then I noticed two storks off in a corner, and she was tucked in to him. And it was just such a loving moment. And I thought, oh my God, and I just took the picture, you know, I cropped it so it was just below the neck, and it was just the two faces. That was one of the images that was in Nature's Best.
Oh my
And I remember
gosh.
I couldn't find the raw file, and they kept writing me, and I thought, oh my gosh, they really must want this. But it was just because it caught a moment, a special moment.
Oh, that is so
special moment in nature.
sweet.
And then you get the interaction between the parents and the babies and the love that they show. I look at the eagles and how attentive they are. You know, as the baby eaglets grow, the parents may just go up to the top of the tree and guard the tree. And they give them as much liberty as possible, but just within a safety, area. And then they teach them. They teach them how to fish. And so when we're photographing, we try and get the babies when they're tiny, and then as they start to use their wings, they start to learn. They're getting ready to fledge, and then when they finally do fledge, the parents stay close by because they teach them to fish. So you catch them, and they call them. You know, I've stood there and I've heard them calling. They won't feed them for a while, hoping that they can, coax them out, and they do. And so you just try and catch that. There's an excitement when you see them learning all the same. The same with the swallowtail kites. We filmed those, and I remember seeing the fledgling when it finally made its first flight. The parent was right on top, and we tried to get them together where it's flying right alongside the baby, just watching. And I thought, oh,
that is so
incredible.
Sweet. Now, where do they nest? Do they nest up high?
Yeah, they do. They nest in a tree.
Because I see them sometimes around my house, but they're so high up in the sky.
Yeah. No, they nest just very much like an eagle would in the tree, and they bring in iguanas and little lizards and things for the babies, and they're good. I mean, you really see good parenting in nature.
Aww.
Very attentive, and often it's both. both the male and the female, except in the hummingbird family. Now it's the female. The male,
love them and leave them, baby.
That's it, Peggy. You said it. That's it. That's it. And then she makes the nest. She feeds the babies. She stays with them till they fledge.
More like humans. I'm going to get some flack on that line.
But I could go on and all those things. There's so many things.
You're right, though. You know, until I got a bird feeder, I've never really been that interested in birds. You know, they're so beautiful, and living in Florida, oh gosh, we are so lucky to live in Florida because the birds here are amazing. But once I got the bird feeder and the cardinals, that's what I noticed, because I finally realized that the black beak ones are the juveniles, because I didn't know. I thought, how come they have a black beak? So I figured that out. But then the mom or the dad would be feeding them. I mean, they were perfectly capable of feeding themselves out of my bird feeder, but the mom or dad would be feeding them, and it was just so sweet. It really is. So sweet.
And it's truly interesting how everything's made so uniquely for what they need. You know, you look at the beak. When you were talking about beaks, it made me think of the swordtail, or not swordtail, but sword-billed hummingbird in Ecuador. Its bill is longer than its body. And it has to keep its head up, because if it put its beak down, it would fall over. And I thought, what a life that bird lives, but it can feed on flowers where no other bird can.
Oh, because it can get deep into
and the flower piercer, and you just could go on and on. Everything's made for a particular way of life, and it's been so fascinating.
Yeah, that is. You know, it was funny, talk about stories and birds. I was thinking of a picture that Joe has. And I don't even know, he may have photoshopped it, but he had the bird, and it was like mostly negative space. So the bird is a silhouette, and it was sunset time, and it was flying, and it just felt like that bird's going home for the night.
So
you know,
peaceful.
like talking about telling a story. And maybe he changed the sky, I don't know. Because I know he does stuff like that.
That would be beautiful.
Yeah, you can really tell a lot of stories with your photographs. Especially with animals. I mean, it's not just their behavior, but, I mean, not their behavior between each other, but things like that, too.
Yeah. Oh, that would be beautiful.
All right, so, best light. Are you going to say the golden hour?
Yes. Isn't the golden hour magical?
Yes.
That it's such a small time frame, like about 20 minutes in the morning and 20 at night, but when you see it come in, that's something with photography. I think we become so sensitive to light.
I think so, too.
Whenever light changes, you hardly have to look at your camera to change it, because you know with your eyes that it's starting to go down. But that golden hour just makes the most simple, I don't want to say mundane, because nothing in wildlife is mundane, but a very simple picture, extremely special when you've got the right lighting.
And because, what are the reasons? What's so good about the golden light? The golden hour light.
What I think of is a picture that I took many years ago on the Pontanel, and it was a caiman. Now a caiman is just gray.
A caiman is like an alligator, right?
It's like an alligator, a little bit smaller. And I remember looking back, and the light was hitting the caiman. He had his mouth open. He was on an isthmus of sand. And I thought, oh my, that is so beautiful. He looked like he was made of gold. And I thought, if I can capture that, and I jumped in the boat and lay on my stomach and put my lens up, and I think I got 4 pictures. But you never know when you take one that fast whether your settings are right, whether they'll turn out, but it did. Oh. And it truly, I called it night reflections. It was just gold reflecting into the water. But 5 minutes later, it was just gray.
So fast, you're right.
It was just a plain caiman on a sandbar.
Wow.
So it really can, I think it's what makes a picture special.
Yeah.
Really special. And both morning has that light and night.
Well, it adds that pretty gold color. And it's directional light, so you can get the shadows like of a, I don't know about caimans, I don't know anything about them, but like an alligator, they've got that texture.
Yeah.
So that directional light is going to give a shadow on each part of the texture to make it more textury. Is that a word?
Makes it three-dimensional.
Thank you. That's the better. That's the sophisticated word.
If you can do that. No, and a spoonbill in that golden light, they just almost look like they're lit up, like they're in the spotlight.
Yeah. We're so lucky to be here, aren't we? We have the spoonbills right outside well, not outside the window unless you live somewhere really cool.
We are fortunate.
But I have painted buntings outside my window.
I wish I had painted buntings.
Ooh,
We're trying to coax them in, but they haven't come yet.
But you know what? I have not seen the male in 3 months. But
really?
There are 2 females. Where'd the male go? I don't know. But my parents, he's at my parents' house because they're about 10 minutes away. They've got a male.
You're fortunate to have them so close.
Oh yeah, I am. I'm very lucky.
Oh,
but I still
awesome.
have them too, you know. All right, so does the time of day matter? Sometimes, like if you're shooting a dark bird or a light bird, or like the environment, like, you know, if you're shooting in the mangroves where there's a lot of shade, or...
Well, once you get back, you know, I don't usually photograph past 9:30 in the morning here in Florida.
But 9:30 is pretty bright already.
Yep. Other parts of the country you can shoot all day, but here in Florida the sun is bright, and it'll bounce off the leaves of the trees or whatever's around, and the white birds will get burnt out. You know, you can't get any detail in the whites. But as far as the black or white or whatever, I don't know that it makes a huge difference. But I just think harsh light is harsh light, and it's gonna spoil.
Look good,
you know, you can take pictures, but I don't think you'll ever be happy with them.
Yeah.
If you take them in that harsh light.
Does using a polarizing filter help?
I think not so much with birds well, I don't use it for birds, but I know in landscaping it's you know, can be a real asset in giving your...
Well, that's what made me think of when you said the white, on the leaves, you would use a polarizing filter, but I've never heard a birder talk about polarizing filters.
The only time, you know, the only time I've ever used a polarizer is when I was doing rivers and the water breaking, you know, on a very slow shutter speed. But because I don't use them, I wouldn't be nearly as knowledgeable as some people. I'm sure that.
All right, so let's talk about the background. Now, what can you do if your background is boring, or does the background matter? Let's talk about backgrounds.
Well, I think when you're setting up a composition, you're always going to look at the background, so you're in control of where you're standing. Okay. So you can move. If you've got a stick in one place, it's not very attractive in your composition, then move and see if you can eliminate that. But I think backgrounds are extremely important, and if you can get something with color, subtle colors, or dark, and then blend that, you know, have a very shallow depth of field, then that just goes into the background, and your subject then pops and it just comes to life. And yeah, you do want backgrounds are very important.
Now, I'll tell you one of the mistakes that I see, at least I think it's a mistake, in bird photography with the backgrounds, is there's often, I'm going to call it a stripe. It's not a stripe, but it's like where the bush ends and the sky begins. If that's in a weird place behind the bird, it's distracting.
It absolutely is,
and I see that
Peggy.
a lot.
Yeah.
How, if somebody's got that problem and they see it, how can they stop themselves from taking that picture? Well, they could get lower.
They could get lower. They could put their tripod higher. Because you don't ever want anything cutting the middle of your picture.
Right.
You know, you either have more sky and less below, or you have more if it's water below.
And you don't want it cutting around the head either.
No, and you don't want anything cutting the beak of the bird. You want to keep your subject as clear as possible. So you just really have to work with that and move your...
Just have to pay attention and make sure...
Really pay attention.
So no stark lines or sharp lines or anything. Not sharp.
No, and the horizon.
Yeah.
The horizon's a big thing. I often see pictures and they're posted and they may be very, very lovely. But if the horizon's off, that's what your eye's going to go to.
And you mean crooked when you say off?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it tilts.
So
you know,
so
you've got your
fix too.
Your water or your sky or whatever.
It's so easy to fix.
It is easy to fix.
There's no excuse.
No, you're absolutely right, Peggy. It's a quick trick, a very quick trick.
All right, so let's. If I'm okay, so what if I'm just trying to think of a way to. Okay, so are techniques different for shooting birds in different places? Like you were talking about the cayman while you were on the boat. If I'm on a boat and I'm photographing birds, obviously I can't move up and down or whatever. First of all, I want to have a faster shutter speed, right? Because you're moving. You're already moving if you're on a boat.
Yeah.
But
it's tough to shoot from a boat.
Yeah,
it really is. Hopefully the boat, it's quiet waters and the boat can stop and you can, keep it as still as possible. But it is difficult.
Yeah.
Not a whole lot. You can't have tripods really in a boat.
No.
Unless it's a large, a really large boat that could accommodate it. But for the most part, you wouldn't see a tripod.
Yeah.
So
I know, we give Everglades tours, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of people say, oh, do you take a boat? And it's like, no. I mean, we can take you to the places. We don't need a boat to get you to those great places.
Sure.
And the boat's just going to, if you want a boat ride, we'll take you on a boat ride. But if you want to go out and photograph, it's going to be better if you're on foot.
Yep.
So,
yeah.
And
I don't think there's
rides.
an answer to the boat.
No.
You just hope you have a steady hand in the water still. I don't know.
How about, so is it basically, there's no difference if a bird is in a tree, a shorebird, a bird's a bird is a bird, right? What about, though, the big difference, the hardest part about bird photography is the flying birds?
Yeah, I love that.
Now,
that part of the
tell us
photography.
some keys to that, because that's really hard.
It
Everybody's
is.
like, well, you have to have the eye in focus. How the heck do you get the eye in focus?
Well, when I started bird photography, that was something that I really wanted to become as skilled at as possibly could. Practice was a huge thing. You go out and you practice with the slowest birds you can find, and those that were Cotahatchee were the ibis.
Okay.
They be coming at night, and I'd shoot hundreds of these birds, and I'd come home and Gary'd say, don't you get to, and I said, it's practice, honey, because when the faster birds come, I want to be ready for them. But it's also really important that you get them from a distance and get them in focus and follow them, because now when we were shooting in the Osa, one of the fellows wanted to shoot this bird as it took off, and I said, well, if you want to do that, you've got to move down the line. You've got to figure out he's going to fly to the right. So move way down the right so that you're not getting a tail shot, because if you're standing right in front of that bird and he takes off, you're going to get a butt shot.
Oh yeah, butt shot.
But it's anticipation. And if a bird is perched, you can usually tell by body language. If you watch them long enough, you can start to tell when they're getting ready. You've probably heard people say, that bird's going to take off.
Yeah, yeah.
Because there's
I learned from somebody that, I don't know.
Like the eagles?
They poop before
That's
they...
right. Yeah, the eagles very often will do. Well, a lot of birds will. A lot of birds.
Poop and then boom, they're about to go. That's
so I
interesting.
think, learning the behavior.
But that's good advice too, to be in front of them.
Yeah, you want to anticipate you've got to think about what you're after, what you want to get, and then be prepared for that. And when I'm focusing, I focus on the eye. If the bird's close enough and I can see the eye well, then I focus on that and I'm ready for it. But if you're catching a bird that's far away, you're not going to be able to exactly get on but that's your ideal, to have the focus on the eye, because that's where the life is. And
so you're using one focus point, correct?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And now I don't know a lot about, because I think your camera is very sophisticated. Does it have the focus zones?
Yeah, no, it does.
Do you use
I think
the zones?
150. There's 155.
So you have zones,
points.
and then you have one point within the zone. Is how it works.
Sometimes you use 1 point, but sometimes they use various points, like 25.
But they're all in one area.
Yeah, in an area. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And does that make it easier to focus, or is that is that kind of like automatic, but just in that
zone?
Yeah,
it's automatic focusing.
So it's going to look for.
But what I see in my camera is just one square that's lit up, and and I'll often check afterwards to see how close I am to that eye.
Which square do you have focus?
Well, it's the center.
The center one.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm assuming you're using servo or continuous.
Yeah, I use the high
focus mode.
Mm-hmm. Continuous high usually.
Well, that's the drive mode, though, right?
Yeah.
The drive mode's that one. That's this. Right?
Exactly, just like a machine gun.
But the continuous focus mode, isn't that what Nikon calls it? AFC?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that follows, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
There's just so many buttons on the camera that really, I took Creative Live to just refresh myself because each camera's a little bit different. And,
Well,
and people have varying ideas on what you shoot, what you should be shooting in. Some people like the automatic ISO, some people don't.
do you like it?
I personally would prefer not to. I like to be in control of it all, but I think there are occasions where it works out well.
I
don't use it.
I didn't like it at all in the beginning when they first came out with it, which was 10 years ago or something, and now I don't use it all the time, but I do use it. When I'm like when we are roaming the streets in Cuba and we're out at noon,
It's a wonderful country.
and it's dark in the shadows, and then it's bright over here, and it's nice just to, you can whip around and do the
you
street
don't have to
photography
worry.
without thinking, because you're kind of shooting in automatic, but you still set your shutter speed and your.
Yeah.
But then as soon as I want to take like a wide scene and it's dark and light, I want to bracket. So you can't do that with auto anything, you know.
I know.
So.
Well, it's experience. Now I know there are some people that are totally against it, but then I've heard people speak on the auto ISO, and as you were saying, when you're traveling in the sky and you're going down, it's back and forth, back and forth. Sometimes you don't have the time. I'm always flipping in the camera as I'm looking, through the lens, but you don't always have time to do all that. So I'm sure it can be very beneficial.
Well, I would think, I know a lot of bird photographers use aperture priority. I don't know, because birds in flight is not I haven't ever really I've tried a few times, but it doesn't count. But I would think I would want it to be more like, make sure my shutter was fast enough. And
that is the key.
I would think shutter priority would be a better mode, but I never hear bird photographers use shutter priority.
I always shoot in manual, and most photographers that I'm friends with shoot in manual. It was actually Artie Morris. He was standing next to me at the alligator farm many years ago, and he said, "Judy, what are you shooting in?" That time I was shooting in aperture priority. He said, "You really ought to think about manual." And I said, "Really?" And so it was a change because I wasn't used to having to set everything.
Right.
But once I got used to it, I don't shoot in anything else most of the time but manual.
So do you change your aperture or your shutter speed if you need to subtly change things when you have the camera up to your eyeball and you're tracking a bird and it's going into a dark spot? Are you going to slow your shutter speed, or are you going to open your aperture?
No, I'm not going to.
Or both.
When I go out to shoot, I set my shutter speed first because usually I'm shooting for action. Basically, that's what I shoot, is action. Then I go to the f-stop or the ISO, because there's just the three areas that bring light in. But when I'm shooting in a bird in flight and I've got the camera up and I see that my exposure is underexposed or overexposed, it'll likely be the f-stop that I'll be moving. It won't be the shutter speed, because I need to keep that up as high as I can to get the stop action. So if you had time, you might even you really wouldn't want to change your ISO. It would be the
ISO would take too long anyway.
Pardon?
ISO would take too long to change.
Yeah, it would take too long. It's the front button, which is your f-stop, and I just roll it. You do it so automatically after time, you forget what you're really doing. It's just, you just do it.
For me, who teaches so much, though, I never forget, because I'm constantly teaching, and so now I'm aware of everything I do. So for me, it's the same thing. Now I don't do too many weddings anymore, but when I was doing weddings, everything was manual, and I would change my f-stop because the bride would come down the aisle. Well, I live in Southwest Florida, so all of the weddings are on the beach, right? So they would, let's say it's at a hotel on the lawn, it's like you're in the shade, you're in the sun, you're in the shade, you're in the sun, you're in the shade, you're in the sun. It's like, oh my gosh. So you have to sit there and change either, and I would change the same thing. Aperture, of course, for us, it's the thumb.
You just know where it is.
Canon, it's the thumb.
Yeah.
So just F4, F5, 6, F4, F8, But it doesn't. You don't even have to put your camera down. That's why. That's why I teach everybody to shoot in the manual mode, because you have total control over what you're doing, and once you learn where the dials are, you never even take that camera off your eyeball.
No. But that's the hardest thing, isn't it, for someone learning? They think, how do you roll that? How do you change it? looking in the camera. Well, you know what it's going to do and what's going to happen. But that's practice.
Well, it's just practice, just like you
Yep.
said. I mean, you practiced on those ibises because they were easier. You practiced, and then you got onto the cheetah of birds, which I don't know what that is. What's the fast bird?
Cheetah birds. I'd like to know what the cheetah birds are too. Obviously, the fastest birds going.
That's why I said it.
No,
I don't know. What's a fast?
I got it, Peggy.
What's
I
a
got
fast bird? What is a fast bird?
What is the fast? Well, little green herons are pretty fast.
Are they?
What?
Hummingbirds, maybe?
Yeah, hummingbirds are fast, but not, you know, they hover a lot, so that they aren't quite as difficult. I think the little green herons are probably as fast as anything that I can think of off the top of my head. They're like little bullets. Oh, and purple martins and those little guys
the
are
smaller
pretty fast.
the bird, the faster they seem to go, right?
Yeah, they don't have as much to move through.
Yeah, because the herons
Yeah.
just kind of. Ooh,
I know.
love to watch a heron fly.
I do too.
They are
They're
so beautiful. They remind me of ballerinas. They're just beautiful. God, we're lucky to be here. Sorry
Yay,
to all
Florida.
our listeners up there in Minnesota.
I know.
Okay, so how important is even lighting? And I have a reason for asking this because I'm still a working photographer other than the teaching and the tours and things. So I was working an event, and for one of the auction items was a photograph of a bird. And I didn't like it because it had like weird shadows.
Like a mottled light.
Yeah, and I was like, ooh. And it didn't go for, it went for okay because, there was pressure. But
Yeah.
I was surprised. I thought, this photographer, knew better than that. But is that just my opinion? Maybe
No, I think
obviously,
that-
maybe he thought it was a good picture. Or maybe
Yeah.
he thought it was just crappy when he was trying to get rid of it.
Well, honestly, photography is an art form, so it's in the eye of the beholder. It's like paintings. Some people are drawn to some types of paintings and some aren't.
Yeah.
For me, I tend to, and I think probably the rule of thumb is to try to get as even a light as possible.
Okay.
You don't want to have shadows, lights and shadows going across your subject. But, as we said in the beginning, there's always rules to be broken. It's just
Right.
like in the cropping, you don't really always want a square picture, but there's times where that works.
Yeah, yeah.
I haven't actually seen a model picture that was, I don't know if I've taken any, because I do look for that even lighting, but I'm sure there has to be some that are probably.
No, the one
very
thing I
cool.
learned from Artie Morris is if the sun is to your back, you're going to get even lighting on the bird. That's what he
Unless you're
said.
in a canopy.
Oh.
If you're in
so
a
tell me about
canopy,
a
you're going to
canopy.
get, because the lighting that's coming, even though the light's in your back, you're going to get lighting coming between the trees, and that's going to hit the bird unevenly. So you'll get that mottled lighting. And we were doing that because there was a fellow from Georgia that was down shooting, and I was looking at the barred owl, and I said, this is a very uneven light on this side, but I said, if you look over this way, the light was still behind us. He was in an area where the light was evenly coming through because it was more open, and the owl didn't have any model light. So you really just have to keep your eyes open to where, you can get that even light. Because it does, I think it makes for a much
Nicer picture.
nicer
so do
picture.
So do I.
But definitely the canopy can be difficult for that very reason.
Oh,
And I
yeah.
don't think it's my personal opinion, but I don't think it's all that attractive to look up and see all the light coming through the branches and your subject, because it's taking your eye away from the main subject, and you're looking at all these things. And
hot spots or whatever.
yeah, it's almost like it may not be a hot spot, but it looks like a hot spot.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Do you ever use a reflector?
No, I haven't used.
I've never heard of a birder doing that. I'm just curious.
Yeah, that's a good question,
Because you
Peggy.
could probably reflect some serious light a long distance with a
Yeah.
big reflector,
Yeah.
right?
No,
But
that
I don't
isn't
know
something
anyone
that
who's ever done that.
Well, we have on some of the macro wildlife we've done, but not on birds. Like if you're doing frogs,
Something that's not going to move away
yeah,
too
something
quickly.
that's not going to move. We've done that because you don't want to have that direct light hitting the frog's eyes. So you try to direct the lighting so it's illuminated, but not directly into his face. So it works well.
Frogs.
Yeah.
Ribbit.
Yeah.
How many
Frogs. Where's my frog?
Oh, that's right. You got a big frog on your chest. For the audio people, you have to come in to understandphotography.com and see Judy's picture with her frog on her chest. It's a pretty big frog, too.
Yes, but he's not heavy.
It's not heavy. Okay, so is it better to try to take the picture exactly as you want it, or shoot a little wide and crop later?
I think the ideal is to do the best you can in the camera.
Okay.
In other words, you try and get your composition, your lighting, your exposure, all those things in the camera. But it's not the end of the road if you don't have it all in the camera and you're fairly proficient in Photoshop. You can do the cropping the way you want it. You can usually tweak the exposure so that you get it right on. You can do a lot of small things and make it what the outcome to be what you want it to be.
And then of course if you got 46 megapixels like you do, you can crop if you just can't, if it's just too far away.
Yeah.
Right? That's a reason to give room.
Yeah. But I've heard people say, well, you know, don't worry about it. You can do it in Photoshop. And I'd said, that's not photography then.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you really want to do the best you can in the camera.
Yeah.
But
although
not to give up.
There's something to be said for leaving some room because, you know, say you take a bird in flight and you just didn't quite get enough room in front.
You can add canvas.
You can add canvas.
You can do that, but you wouldn't be able to enter that into any contest because they ask you for the raw file, so they know exactly how it was taken.
Good point.
They know exactly what you've done in the camera. And if you've added, taken away, then it's
Even
rejected.
if you crop, they reject it?
No, they don't.
Some do or no?
For any of the contests like Nature's Best or National Wildlife Federation or any of these, they allow you to crop. They allow you levels which changes your coloring, you know, whether it's lighter or darker or whatever, the levels, medium tones, light tones, dark tones, curves, and sharpening. And that's really basically all they allow. Or you could take out dust bunnies. You know, if your camera lens happens to be dirty, they won't penalize you for that. They'll let you take that out.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Now, you're a judge with PSA and...
No, I wasn't a judge with, I did a presentation for PSA out in Colorado a few years back. I have done some judging, but it's where I liked judging was when I was a moderator with Artie Morris, because that was encouraging people, but at the same time helping them in maybe areas they might think of for the next picture. You know, maybe might think of this next time. Judging is a difficult thing for me because I don't want to leave people with feeling like they're disappointed in what they've done. You know, live judging takes a special. They've asked me to do that, but you know, we all have different personalities, and I don't think mine lends to that.
Joe is so good at it.
I think it's a talent. I think it's wonderful. It is an extreme talent
because he can look at a picture and he could talk about that picture for 20 minutes. And I'll look at it and say, nice leading lines. You know?
Yeah. Well, I can see in a picture what might be wrong with it, but it's another thing to tell people.
Yeah.
If it's live.
Yeah.
And you know, some people take it well and some people don't.
Yeah, I know.
And,
good point. I'll tell you what, you ever want to... I think they've gotten kinder over the years, but the PPA judging used to be brutal. I mean, those people, it was like almost like they tried to be as mean as they could be. It was awful. But I think that they've gotten nicer because they realize that people aren't competing because you guys are so dang mean. Yeah. You know, so they've become a lot nicer. The last time I watched it, because it's all live on the internet, you can watch it. And people were just nice. I was so surprised because when I first started, they were...
important, and that was something that Artie always talked about. He said, don't, you know, always start off with all the positives in a picture that you're critiquing, and then, you know, mention the things that maybe they might want to change. And I thought that was very good advice, because I had a friend who was a nice man, got excited, got a 500 lens, and he was so excited and everything. The next thing I knew, he was selling it. And I said, why are you selling it? He said, I'm just not any good. I'm not like everybody else. And I said, oh, no, don't say that. You know, it takes practice. You've got to get, I said, just go out and shoot and shoot and shoot. You'll get better and better.
And plus, I think sometimes we forget that we're doing this because it's fun.
Exactly.
There's a lot of joy in photography. You don't have to get the perfect picture all the time.
I agree with you, Peggy, 100%. It is. It's fun. It's wonderful to be out there. It's amazing what we learn, what we see. And, you know, sometimes competition is good, but it can be too much sometimes too.
Yeah.
It holds people back.
Yeah, and you comparing yourself. Somebody made a YouTube comment today. We all laughed about it, but I forget what the guest said. Something about there's a lot of mediocrity out there, and he said something about, oh, I really relate to this guest because I have a lot of mediocre pictures or something like that. We all laughed. It was funny, but it's like, so we all do.
Yeah, we all do. We all hit
Those aren't the ones that hit the website, you know?
We all hit that delete button.
Yeah.
Delete, delete, delete.
Now, do you have any go-to post-processing techniques like that you do every time?
Yes, and it's basically the same every time. I very seldom change. I don't do very much. As I was saying earlier, I try and get it in the camera. So what I do is go in, I crop first, and then I check the eye and make sure that's nice and clear. And if it is, because that's where your life is. If that's really what I want it to be, then I'll go on. I'll go to levels. If it needs tweaking, I'll do that. And then curves. Sometimes I don't always use curves, but sometimes it makes your picture pop a little.
Yeah.
And and if there is any noise in the picture, sometimes if we've really had to have a high ISO, it'll bring in a little noise in your picture, then I'll use topaz. Try not to use very much because that really deletes a lot of your information.
Yeah, yeah.
And then go to sharpening, and that's it.
That's it. That's pretty much
your
main way of editing.
Yeah, it doesn't, you know, I know there are people that'll take hours and hours, and I kind of shake my head and I think, what are they doing all that time? It doesn't take me very long to.
It depends on for me, because sometimes I start getting sucked into stuff, and then I'm like, I wonder what this filter would look like. You know what I mean? I start going through the Nick filters or the topaz stuff, and oh, let me try this blending mode, and you know, I kind of,
yeah.
But unfortunately, I don't have that. I don't have a lot of free time because I would do that all day long, play around with Photoshop. I like playing around with Photoshop, but I hardly ever do just because I don't have the time. I don't have time.
I know. You can get lost at the computer. Sometimes I'm shocked. An hour's gone by and it seems like a minute.
I know. All right, so what do you got coming up? You got a big one coming up in May, right?
Yeah,
we
head off to Namibia.
Namibia.
And that is a wonderful place. It's you can see just about every species there except for hippos.
Hippos?
And what's the other one we don't see so much?
Buffalo. You told me earlier. That's the only reason I know.
Because we don't have the water. But it's wonderful because it's self-drive. And we usually limit the trip to about 6 people, so we have 3 vehicles. 2 to a vehicle, so you've got your driver in the front, passenger in the back, and you both can shoot from the same side. And we go out early morning, soon as the sun comes up, as soon as they open those gates, we're gone. And people have the option that are with us of either staying out all day, which we do,
like all day,
or they can return to the camp. It's easy to get back. It's always easy to get back to camp, and you can shoot till sunset.
Okay.
And the thing that's so nice about it is if you're at a water hole and you see zebras that are, you know, in some kind of a combat mode, you can stay and you can shoot and you can get all that action, and you're just not held up to any time frame. So, and we usually take lunches with us in the cars, so we eat there.
How small are the cars if you have 2?
No, we get Helix, which is a big vehicle.
But you said that 2 people per vehicle plus the
Yes,
driver?
because we don't have, well, because you want to be able to shoot from the same side. If you had a
okay.
third person in there, then that third person's going to be, if
Missing
the action's
out.
on the right-hand side, they're going to be left out.
I see.
And what you have is in all that space to the left of you for your gear. So you can put all your lenses and everything right there. There's just you and your gear and whoever's driving and
So when
their
you
gear.
stay out all day, you go to the bathroom in the bush?
Sometimes, but there are places to stop.
Okay.
Yeah. But there are times where there isn't. So you just have to have somebody stand guard.
Yeah.
That's not too often though.
So all day, so tell me about a day. So you go out for, you drive to one spot, you take some pictures, and then as the action wanes, you drive to the next spot? Is that kind of?
Well, there's just various spots that are known for different things. And they always have a log in the camp saying where things have been sighted.
Oh, okay.
So you always check those out, make sure, and we'll go down. If they've sighted lions, we'll go down and check that out, see if there's any. There's one water hole that's particularly good for a lot of different animals coming in. So we always make sure that we spend time there. And it depends on how much action there is. If there's lots, we could be there half a day at that one water hole because you can get everything coming in. The giraffes, the rhinos, the lions, the whatever.
How cool
The zebras.
Is that?
And when you see these long herds of zebras coming in, it's breathtaking.
Oh
It's just
my
breathtaking.
gosh.
So you're at the time, whatever is allowed, whatever is happening. If it's great, we stay. If we don't, we move on to another water hole. And it can vary because not everything stays the same in nature. Some water holes are better, one day than another.
Wow.
But there's one that's particularly good, and I think of it every time I think of going. It's awesome.
And you're going to be there just in a month and a half or something,
Yeah.
right? Wow.
And
And that trip is full, though. You don't have any
that
openings.
trip is full. And there's 4 different, well, actually there are 5 camps that we could go to. I think we're going to 4 this time. And they all have different, the area is different, so your backgrounds are going to be different, your opportunities are different. Some might have more hyenas than another camp.
Okay.
So you get as much as you possibly can. And the bird life is wonderful in Etosha. Lots of beautiful birds, lots of...
Now, how long is your trip?
Usually they last about 10 days, 10
And
to
it's
14
all
days.
safari the whole time?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Well, except for the flying time coming in
Yeah,
and
yeah.
leaving.
But so the actual safari time is 8 days?
Yes, it would be 8 days.
Wow.
Yeah.
How awesome.
Yeah, and it truly is nice when you can stay. You don't have to go back, to have breakfast or go back to have lunch. But if some people, if we haven't had it happen, but if they did get tired and they said, I need to take a rest or whatever, they'd be able to do that. They're not
And you
held
just
to a
bring
tight
a picnic
schedule.
lunch.
Pardon?
You just bring sandwiches or
Yep.
something. It's funny, my last trip to Cuba, the people complained that we fed them too much.
Oh, did they?
Yeah, I thought, you know what, you're right. We don't need to eat all these big meals twice a day,
No. Isn't Cuba wonderful, though?
I love Cuba.
I did, too.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
I love it, love it. All right, so what else? You got any openings on any of your stuff?
Not this year.
You're just
we're going
too
to Ecuador.
popular.
Yeah.
Are there any openings in Ecuador?
No, there aren't in Ecuador this year, no.
If you want to go on a trip with Judy, you better get on a stick.
Yes, come, it's fun. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Ecuador is exciting because we're going to go to the northern part and the southern part this year, so we'll be down into the got a mental block. Amazon. We're down close to the Amazon in the southern part.
And when are you going there?
The end of August into September. Now I shouldn't say, we do have openings for the Pontanel it's usually in the end of September.
When you say usually?
I don't know I don't think we have dates as yet.
Okay.
Gary's working on that right now.
Okay.
But that's a great place too. There's lots to see there. Beautiful birds and of course the jaguars.
Oh wow.
That's pretty breathtaking when you see them come out of
You are living a cool life, aren't you?
Well, it's a yes. Yes. What can I say? Yes. It is what but I'm very thankful. I'm thankful that I've got a husband that loves it as much as I do.
Yeah.
And loves photography and is a good organizer. You know, he's a very detailed organizer. So our trips, when we go on a trip, he has a letter that goes out that lists absolutely every single thing that you're going to need on that trip, right down to the last pill, the last whatever. And I said, oh man, Gary, I couldn't even begin to think of all those things.
So you make a good team.
Yeah, he's awesome.
Oh, I love that. All right, and what's your website so people can find
Nature's
you?
Tapestry.
Nature'sTapestry.com.
JLM, which
Wait a
is
minute.
my initials, JudyLynnMalick.com.
So Naples
Nature's
Tapestry.
Tapestry.
I said Naples.
Yeah.
Nature's.
What's easy? Nature's Tapestry, JLM.com.
Thank you. I'm not even going to try to say it. I don't know what's wrong with me. But we will have Judy's website link on our website, so it will be correct.
It won't be Naples.
No, I know I got Naples in my mind. Well, thank you for being on the show again.
Thank you.
And
It's been
start
a pleasure.
thinking about the next topic because you got to come back. You're so good at teaching, and that's what we want for the show. We want it to be a teaching show.
Well, I love it, and I want everybody to love it like I do and have all the opportunities. And
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you. Well, I'm Peggy Farren. Thanks for watching the Understand Photography show. Next week we have Jennifer King on, so you don't want to miss that show. We're going to talk about creative compositions. Thanks so much for watching the Understand Photography show.